Welcome to this second series of the episode 2 of the Adaptive Cards Deep Dive. This time we'll be talking about adaptive cards in Teams and Outlook in a more deeper way than Matt showed it, because he just showed you last time the tip of a mountain. Now I will just go in somehow deeper. A very short introduction about, come on, don't disappoint me. Right. Technology. Sorry. Yeah, maybe I just used my mouse. So anyway, my name is PostInactive. For those of you who don't know me, who doesn't know me, sorry, I need to watch my English. Who doesn't know me yet? I'm coming from Warsaw in Poland, and I'm working with those technologies, not only with adaptive cards, but generally speaking with Power Platform and Microsoft technologies for many years in a row, actually, ever since I started my IT career. No, that's not true. But anyway, once I accidentally was introduced into a project around SharePoint 2003, migration 2007, then I just got somehow stick to that technology, and I am with this Microsoft company until today. So if you're interested, if you'd like to connect with me, somehow find my blog post, my blog posts, or my YouTube channel, or Twitter, or any other social media, then this is the one URL to rule them all. So if you go here to aka.ms/PostInactive, then you will find all those URLs. This QR code below also guides you to that URL. Okay, and that's enough about me. Now, a very brief intro to, and maybe some kind of reminder about what Matt Hidinger said last time, if you were not present, or maybe if the 2 weeks of a gap between one meeting and another was enough to somehow forget. So basically, the adaptive cards and the card technology in general is this thing that we see in many applications and community, or social applications, communication applications, where you have this kind of a content that is coming from outside of this application, of this web page, for example, but it is being displayed within the content and it fits. So you have this experience, you have this feeling that actually it belongs there, that possibly it was generated by this web page. And then wherever you go, for example, to those tiles in Windows, or maybe to Cortana or WhatsApp or Skype or any other application, not only from Microsoft stack of tools, but like Slack or WhatsApp or Facebook or Messenger, then this content that is coming from elsewhere can be displayed, and you can name it that, well, okay, this is somehow is coming from a different source, not the Facebook itself. And so this way, the cards in general are the technology that helps us designers to actually display the content that we've created. And this content is being presented inside of the host experience, so that the host actually takes care about how it looks, how it displays, how it adjusts to the margins, and so on. You already make him sleep? Wow, that was lightning fast. I think that the history is nothing that we should go through, because Matt somehow told it. But 2016 it all started, and then you just go briefly through 2 years, and 2 years after we had this first version of adaptive cards. And also what made them very special, and that thing Matt didn't actually mention, is that this card, I mean, the fact that they natively render on any of those hosts that do have SDK embedded, implemented, is one thing. But another thing is that thanks to all these functionalities that it has, it's really a low-cost technology to create a content. So you can actually create this content in a JSON, and then you can display it on mobile, on the web, inside Teams on your desktop. So whichever channel you will choose, you have just one JSON, and then those hosts spread across the whole universe are actually displaying it. So you don't need to really focus on how to create my card for Outlook, how to create my card for the my mobile version of Teams. And so each channel doesn't have to be handled separately. And also what is very important, and that was also mentioned last time, is that because we are actually designing the cards using JSON, and that JSON has its own schema, therefore once the JSON we prepare is being parsed to be displayed. Therefore, if there is anything that is outside of the schema, then it won't be displayed or will be displayed as a plain text. And therefore, this technology is really secure because you can't simply pass through any kind of like malicious code or any other thing that could harm the end user. So it's really, really secure. Plus, you just saw it last time, it has not only the possibility to show information, but as well to interact with the user, to get feedback from the user. So you can create forms, you can create questionnaires, you can create hyperlinks, and much more. And all these things are actually, so like all the technology, the SDK that Microsoft built is today present in nearly every application that Microsoft is creating that is somehow used for communication. So you can use adaptive cards in Outlook, you can use them in Teams, you can use them in Bot Framework, in Cortana Timeline. And there is also adaptive cards coming to Power Virtual Agents somewhere next year. They were set to be delivered within the Wave 2 2020, so like by the end of this year or maybe beginning of the next year. However, due to some circumstances I am not aware of, they were postponed and possibly will be introduced with the how it's called, this Wave 1 2021. So somewhere second quarter next year or maybe third quarter next year, unfortunately. But what is going to Team talking about is that this SDK that Microsoft is actually creating is an open source. It is hosted on a GitHub. So actually, if you're a developer, you can grab this SDK and then actually use it in your application within or by embedding it in any kind of the open source development framework. So you can use it to create mobile applications. You can use it in your web applications as well, desktop applications. The variety of possibilities is really wide, so that's really up to you. All right, so you know what, I will just jump over to those demos because that's enough of talking. So last time Matt showed you most of the functionalities that the Adaptive Cards Designer has. Just one information around that product is that it has been created by David Clow. So he's the other principal product manager as Matt, but Matt is more focused on the human part of the adaptive cards technology, more on how they displays, what are the functionalities, and David Clow is focused on the development itself. So he's a developer coming from the Outlook and Exchange background. So I don't know if there is anything else you would like to know about the designer. If you have any questions, by the way, simply unmute yourself and let's discuss it. That would be the easiest way. What is really, really important around the designer, apart from the fact you can create a new card from either the scratch or from an existing template, and then you have those elements here to pick and then drag and drop on the canvas, is that you have two other things. So the first one is this target version that you can choose to actually, the designer should work this way in some certain moment of time, that once you switch to another version, it will not only validate the code you're designing here so that it is compliant with that version, with the functionalities that are present in that version, but as well, it will be limiting the number of elements that are present in the speaker so that you can only use those that are actually supported by that specific version. Plus, once you then switch the host up, so for example, if you decide to use Microsoft Teams, then this target version should automatically change to the one that Teams is supporting right now. And therefore, you will know that whatever you design here is going to actually work in Microsoft Teams. Today, this is not yet working that perfectly. Nevertheless, the designer itself gives you a lot of functionalities, and you can actually design these cards in a very drag and drop approach without actually focusing on the JSON that is underneath. So the JSON, you can just simply, in the end, copy and paste. Now, the other thing that we have in agenda for today are the I hate this word, I just can't spell it. Actionable messages for Outlook. Now, one small remark here, one small information or a hint is that this technology only works in Outlook, obviously. So if you would like to post such an awesome thing to Gmail or Yahoo or whatever else email client, then unfortunately they won't be displayed. So there will be nothing displayed at all. Right. So then with those messages for Outlook, I'll just omit the first part of the name. You can as well start from an existing template or just begin with a draft. And then once you do create, then the layout of the designer is a little bit different. So you have the tree that shows you the structure of your card on the left side. The picker with all the elements you can put on the canvas is on the top and is a bit different, but in the end, the functionality is just the same. So you also have to drag and drop. And then what is similar is that all those configurations are on the right side, and the JSON is here at the bottom as well. There is also one other functionality that is not present in the Adaptive Card Designer. So you can send this card to yourself. So once I hit to send it, this card will actually be sent to my own Outlook, so I can preview how it looks, and well, then try to adjust if there is anything wrong, if there's anything not working. Then another thing between the actionable messages and adaptive cards, although what you see here in the payload is actually, whoops. So this is actually just adaptive card, right? So the same technology. However, the schema between the adaptive cards and the actionable messages using adaptive cards has small differences. So the major and the most important difference is related to this submit button. So in adaptive cards that we are sending to Microsoft Teams, we are unable to define where the contents of this card is sent. They are always sent to the host. In terms of Microsoft Teams, it's always a flow bot. So when we are using the action to send an adaptive card to Microsoft Teams, then if there is a form with a submit button, then the contents from the form is first sent to that flow bot. And then if the flow bot is configured to understand what it should do with these contents, then they're being then sent, for example, back to the flow that is waiting for the response. But you cannot define in adaptive cards. So let me just show you here. So once I add why it doesn't display here? All right. So once I add this submit action, here in the configuration on the right side, you can define its layout, you can define its icon, you can define the title, the label, but you cannot define the target URL where the content should be sent. Meanwhile, in the adaptive cards for Outlook, when you have this submit button, you are actually able to define where the contents from this adaptive card should be sent. And speaking of that, you can, for example, create a different another Power Automate that actually awaits for the request from that card, parses it or does the whole logic, and then responds with another adaptive card that is the confirmation one. I will show you this in an action in just a while. The other thing regarding the actionable messages that is extremely important is that when you would like to send this card to yourself only, then you can do it like straight away. You don't actually need to do anything apart from like pasting it into an action and send it using the Outlook action to your inbox. However, if you plan to send it to other users in your tenant, then you need to create a so-called like a bearer ID or the provider ID. And so to do that, you need to go to this email developer dashboard, and you have to register a new provider. And then once you start registering the new provider, you have three options possible. So first option is that you would like to create this provider only for sending the card to a test users. So you have to define their email addresses, and then you are going to be able to send to these users your card. Or you can define a scope on the organization level, which also requires an Exchange admin to hit and approve. This is happening in the Exchange admin center. No, wrong. This, I mean, partially yes, because once you define the Exchange admin wrong, sorry. Once you define the scope and you define the message that you would like to add and send for approval, then the Exchange admin is going to receive an email, and in the email there is a link where they should click and accept this this submission, this request. So anyway, this is the organization level. So by that you will be able then to send these actionable messages to anyone in your tenant. And then there is the global one, which requires an approval from Microsoft. And this one should let you to send those messages to anyone in any tenant. But however, I mean, even though I did have this approval from Microsoft, I think this is the approval too. No, that's the test user, maybe 3. No, so that has to be 1. So even though I have this kind of approval for global, I wasn't still able to send it to another tenant. Possibly I was missing some basic configuration, but I haven't had time to debug it deeper, so I just abandoned that idea. I was happy enough with being able to send this, those messages to anyone in my tenant. So let me well, show you the demo around these 2 things. So first, the demo is around the invoice approval, of course. If you have seen any of my sessions so far, then you definitely know this demo. However, right now, I just want to go a bit deeper into the details. So first, the front desk is actually scanning the invoice. Then they need to pick this invoice in application. The invoice is being OCR'd by the AI builder. Once this is done and they are happy with the outcomes, so right now so now AI builder has recognized all the fields it is taught to recognize. So now once I hit to send it for approval, I just need to change this polyslotty. Then what is going to happen is first the accountancy team in Microsoft Teams channel is going to receive here an adaptive card with a request for approval. And okay, there it goes. Come on, appear, right? So you can see there is this approval adaptive card with all the details. If you maybe I just make it a little bit bigger. So I see Claire is almost inside the monitor, inside the camera. Right. So this is the adaptive card with all these contents, with all the items from the invoice. It is not yet following the templating language because it doesn't work for Microsoft Teams. So I just had to make a loop and actually parse and concatenate every row separately. But the outcomes are satisfying. And then on the other hand, the John researcher, so my, sorry, wrong email, sorry, wrong address. My CFO, let's call him, he should receive now an email with this actionable message with nearly the same contents. Right, so there it is. There should be the 920. Yeah, that's the one. Come on, load. So sometimes I don't know why the first fresh start of Outlook doesn't load those cards, but anyway, it works. So by like being able to send this adaptive card as an actionable message, also the person in email, they just see this card and they actually interact with that. However, thanks to the fact that I am able here to add those target URLs, I'm also able to do some other stuff like sending back a confirmation message or sending back a confirmation card. So for example, we don't have still validation and checking the requiredness of fields in adaptive cards. This is still not working. In Outlook, we are on the version 1.0 still. In Teams, we are in the version 1.2, whereas the validation arrived with version 1.3. So for example, for Teams, if you'd like to make this validation, the easiest way is to simply do that with the application that actually receives this response. So now if I hit reject without providing the reason, yeah, I just received this information, so please fill in the comments, right? So I cannot submit this card because the comments are not filled. On the other hand, if I do approve, this card is going to be closed and replaced with a fancy looking confirmation card. And now how this was done? Well, first of all, when you do create a card, to be sent for Teams, not this flow. Yeah, that one. I told you that there's just small differences between the adaptive card that you are sending to Teams, or you will be able to send to Pivotal agents, or you're just using elsewhere, and the one that you can send to the Outlook. So basically, the beginning of the adaptive card that you are sending to Teams, is it bigger? No, it's not bigger. Version 1.2, and it's just following this regular JSON that you can copy and paste from the adaptive card designer. Meanwhile, the header for actionable message needs to have this version 1.0, which is the only one supported in Outlook right now. And then there are some other properties that are really specific to Outlook only. You can find them all in documentation. And then the most important one is its originator. So the originator is actually this GUID of the provider. So once you register this provider here, for example, let's use it, this one. Come on, open. So this is this GUID. You need to copy paste it and then add a new property in the code of your card. It is not present by default, so you just need to be aware you have to create the originator. Then the correlation ID I used to be able to actually identify that the response from the card is really coming from the card that I have created. So this is like kind of a hash code that can be then used for validation that the response is coming from something I sent. Right, so then like other thing is quite similar. And then the second difference regarding how you should send this adaptive card is that you need to like encapsulate the code. Wrong, sorry. So this is the ending of the actionable message. You can see here that there is the action, the submit action, and that it does have this URL that is actually a URL of another Power Automate that will be triggered by the submit button. And there is this body which contains the comments and the outcome. For the reject, there is a different outcome, obviously. So this is the body, the post body, or the request body is being sent to that Power Automate. And then last thing that is different between Teams and Outlook is that once you have this code of adaptive card ready, then you need to put it between these script tags. And so only by putting the code within those script tags, you are going to be able to actually have it displayed in the Outlook of yours or other user. Okay, so now I'll just make a small stop. If you are trying, or if you're playing with this technology and you do like receive an email, but that email actually doesn't contain any card here, like nothing is being displayed, then there is one product, one tool that is here to help you, that is called the Actionable Messages Debugger, and is present both for the desktop version of Outlook and the web version of Outlook. And it actually displays you the information about the card. So like if there is an error in the card that prevents it to be displayed, you'd find it here. For example, if your card is missing the originator ID, or if this originator ID is wrong, if it's like coming from a non-registered provider, then it will also display you here the information. What is the reason that this card is not being displayed? Like what is preventing it? So this is very useful, and it helps you to debug, as the name states, why this card may not be displayed. Okay, right. So now you have this card ready. So once you send it into the Outlook here, yeah, that's the flow. Then, as in my example, you can create another Power Automate. It's actually waiting for the response from that card. Obviously, it requires premium license because you do need to trigger it via the web request, which is premium. However, this technology never meant to be free, I think. But anyway, well, you saw how the request body is created, so it only contains the comments and the outcome, so it's quite easy. And then what is happening, what I'm checking is if the comments are empty. So if the comments are empty, then there is going to be, send this response. So the code is 406, something's wrong. And this card action status is a parameter that you saw was displayed at the bottom, in Outlook desktop would be displayed below the message header, or somewhere like above the contents of the email, so it would be more visible. In my opinion, in Outlook, in the web version of Outlook, this is hardly really visible, this message. Nevertheless, this way you can make these basic validations. You can just like check what is in the data in the form provided and request any fixes. Now, on the other hand, if everything is fine, like if this is a rejection scenario, but the comments are provided, or if this approval scenario, then what has happened, I use this another header that is called card update in a body. And then if this is set to true, then my original card is going to be updated with the one I am sending as the payload of that request. So actually, I'm just sending a different adaptive card that is being used, as you saw, to replace the original one. And so, speaking about Microsoft, about the Outlook, we can have this consistent layout, look and feel, so that the original card and the confirmation card are following the same patterns, layouts, graphics, and whatever. Meanwhile, in Teams, we don't have that much of flexibility. We are unable to anyhow close this card, differently than by the same action that generated it. So far, we are unable to send response from this card to any other URL. We are unable to send to this card any other of requests that would somehow manipulate its layout. So whatever, the only thing we can do is actually to define a small text that is going to be replaced, that is going to replace the card, but the layout of the card is like by default defined by the bot flow. So now once I say, I don't have to say anything, I just hit approve. You'll see that once it is closed, it is just not that really good looking as the one that was in Outlook. So I was only able to define this text here, and this text is being defined prior to receive data from the card. So even if you'd like to put here information, hey, thank you for your approval or for your rejection, and then this text should be based on the outcome, you cannot do it. So you can just define this text while you're defining or configuring the card, the action, and that's it. So this is how it looks like in the flow itself. Nope. Nope. Yep. Right. So I'll just go briefly to the actions we have in Power Automate. But nevertheless, so this is the action that I used. It's called the PostInactive Card to Microsoft Teams channel and wait for the response. And well, here you can see that it just lets me to define this message, so the payload of the JSON payload of the card, and then I'm able to define this fancy looking thank you message, so the update message, and I actually cannot use here anything coming from the card, so no interaction. Hopefully this will be changed somewhere in the future. All right, so let me just go briefly through the actions that we have in Power Automate that lets us to work with adaptive cards in Microsoft Teams. So I'll just maybe use this trigger and skip for the rest. So when speaking about this interaction with Microsoft Teams, we do actually have four actions that basically are having a name or do contain adaptive card in their names. They're split into two groups. So the first group is used to send adaptive card to Microsoft Teams user or Microsoft Teams channel, but it's not waiting for the response. The other two are maybe not quite new, but they were introduced I think in February this year. And they let you to not only send adaptive card, but as well wait for the response. So if you're planning to post adaptive card that contains a form and you would like to grab the response from that form, then the only options you have is to use these two actions that are waiting for the response. They are waiting for the response as, for example, the Power Automate approval, so until 30 days. So if through the 30 days, now no one is going to respond, submit the card, then this action will simply be terminated and the whole flow will fail because of the timeout. On the other hand, these two actions if you try to send an adaptive card with a form inside, and then you would like a user to respond, I would like to submit that form, then the bot flow will display an error message telling that there is no flow waiting for this response, and therefore this card would never work in that scenario. But on the other hand, we can use this card, just this one, to wait for, like, to post for the user in a different scenario. Possibly you are already aware that once you create a flow approval, so once you create an approval without waiting, then one of the outcomes you can use from that approval, action, is actually the adaptive card. So this Teams adaptive card is actually a fully working 1.0 adaptive card that you can actually post to Teams user, and then add approval action to wait for the approval. So following this pattern, you are able to actually start an approval in 3 channels simultaneously. So you can start an approval in Outlook. If you do say that you want to enable notifications, so if this is set to true, then this will send also this actionable message to Outlook. You will be able to have this approval task under the approvals, under the action items in your flow. And lastly, the user who is assigned is going to have also this approval in their teams. What is only maybe the downside of this approach is that this adaptive card can only be sent to like a single user. So even if you do assign this card to multiple users and then you try to like do a parallel branch or assign different cards in a loop, then from what I heard, but I haven't tried it myself, is that they won't be closed once the approval is finished. So in a situation that the approval is only created for a single person, then it doesn't matter which channel that person will use to complete their approval, either the task or Outlook or the card. Other channels are going to be marked as completed. So in Outlook, they will see information that it has been completed. The card would be closed as well. However, if you decide to assign it to more users, then the adaptive card is not going to be closed. This will just go nuts and it will be displayed forever. So just keep that in mind. It really works for single approver, but for multiple approvers, it doesn't. However, this is a scenario you can actually use this action and it will be working. So for this adaptive card, Flowbot actually knows what it should do, where it should post it, and how it should handle it. For your custom adaptive cards, this action simply won't work. Right, so let me just delete it. But in the end, that's not it. So apart from those 4 actions that are having adaptive card in their names, in Microsoft Teams, there are some other actions that we can use that are also following the adaptive cards technology. So those information that you can use, or the actions you can use, are also the post a message as the flowbot to channel or the Teams user. So this is also a very, very easy adaptive card, however, with only text. And there is also a functionality that lets you to post the same with the options, like to post a choice of options as a flowbot to a user. And this way is also, I mean, this action is also following the adaptive cards approach. So it will not only display your message, but as well you will be able to define the options. And this action is also going to wait for the response. So you can also use it for like a very simple cases where you want to grab the user's response, but only by clicking a button without filling in the form. And there is even more. So when speaking about the triggers, and when we look at Teams, we also have a trigger that is called for a selected message. And this trigger, if you never play with that, it already has this modern approach for designing adaptive cards. So it has this built-in designer that you can find for other actions as well, but only when you turn on those experimental features here. So if you do turn experimental features, then this adaptive card designer built into Power Automate canvas will be present as well. However, it is experimental and it's not really working like very well. So I highly discourage you to use it for your productive environment and for your productive solutions. Simply craft your JSON in a designer and paste it here. Nevertheless, for this action, it does work. Magic. So the action works this way, that once you do select a specific message and then you click the name of the flow from the list of options, it will trigger the related Power Automate. And here you can define the card is going to be displayed as like a starting form for the user where they are asked anything. So let me just show you my example of how it works. The scenario here I have is actually quite easy. It's around the governance. So it follows the functionality that someone is able to actually report a message or maybe do actions with that specific message around its existence, actually. So once you create a flow that is being triggered by the for a selected message trigger, you need to then click the ellipsis icon and then more actions. And then the more actions, you will find your flows. No, like it appeared. So just bear in mind that the label here is actually the name of the flow. So if you decide to have a flow with a very long name, then it can be quite messy. So this is my action. This is my flow. It actually now first asks me about what I would like to do with this message. It does look, gosh, where is it? Yeah, this is the one. Sorry for jumping over those tabs. They should have different names. So nevertheless, this is the trigger, and so you can see it actually lets the user to check or select the reason, and then once they do select the reason, they're just being asked additional questions. And this is what actually happens also in the Power Automate, in the Microsoft Teams. So right after this adaptive card is displayed, I'm then able to actually define or decide what I want to do with this message. So in the scenario of the reporting, for example, I can just mark it as offensive. And this, once submitted, is going to send a request to Microsoft Teams admins who are in a dedicated channel. So then they all receive information. It should just arrive here, pop up, yeah, right? So another adaptive card with the information around this reported message with the link to open it, which actually makes it easier to identify which message was reported because it's highlighted with this yellow hello. And then they also have all the information that the trigger was able to get from that message. So who is the author of the message, where it was posted, yeah, just the channel ID, the contents of the message, and also the information from the user, why they reported it, and details of the reporter. Sorry, my PowerPoint just crashed. Nevertheless, the templating gives you this functionality that helps you to actually bind those placeholders with the data from another JSON that is the data JSON. And for example, if I use the same card that I had created for my scenario with the invoice, and that I have so carefully crafted, I made that loop to iterate over the items from the invoice and to concatenate and to merge, join, whatever, those strings to create all these rows. If the Power Automate, the templating language was working and in place, then the only thing I would have to do is to provide the data in the proper format, provide those placeholders, and then the service or the language will automatically know that if there is a table type of a data in a JSON, which means more than one item, then it will automatically repeat the same structure the number of times, the number of rows there are. So now once I switch to preview mode, it's just done within seconds, and I don't need to create a loops. I don't need to concatenate anything. It's just done automatically for me. With this templating language, it is not only to replace the specific placeholders with their values from the data JSON, but as well we have the formatting functions. We also have the conditions. We also have loops. So, for example, I am able, it's somewhere here, like to make a different color, to set a different color for the amount if the value is like above 1000 or below. So this is also possible with the formatting, with the templating language. So this gives you a really big number of new tools that helps you to design these cards, to create these cards even faster than before. And this is just a binding scope, the data binding scope. However, once we navigate to the roadmap, or if you are carefully listening to what Matt is speaking or talking about during the meetups, there are also different other binding scopes somewhere on their minds. So, for example, a device binding scope that should provide that creator information about the device where the card is being displayed. So, for example, what is the browser name? What is the operating system name? And with that, you can then as well make different layouts of the cards or different buttons for the cards. Maybe buttons not, but different. Okay, you can show different information. For example, whether you're displaying the card on the iOS or on the Android. There should be also the user binding scope, so to get information about the user who is displaying the card, and also to make some kind of a personalized information. So all these goodies are somewhere there on the roadmap or in the backlog, and hopefully they will arrive one day. And if you go to aka.ms/AC roadmap, then you will end up here. So this is the the roadmap for the adaptive cards. And it is split actually into the plan. So what is going to be hopefully delivered in the next version. So this is version 1.4, and what is in their backlog. So what are all those functionalities that someone somehow has reported to them, or they have created on their own, and one day maybe they will be put into the planned stream and delivered sometime later. And so this is this live data binding, so to allow you to actually replace data in the real time. So like to create even the ticking quotes, for example. There is GIF support, and that's going to be intense if it's working. Also the responsive UI, but that's the backlog. Now, if you look at the planned items, then there is more around the fields, around the forms, around the validations. And also there is one cool thing that is called this universal action. I can't find it here. Yes, a universal action model. So today when you were looking carefully, when I was creating a new button, submit or get, therefore I had like 4 options to choose from: to toggle the card, to hide the card, to submit, to get, to open the URL. And with this universal action model, we will simply have just one schema defining the action within the card, and you will be able to simply configure it to your needs. So it will be, again, much faster to create cards. Yeah, this will maybe arrive one day. So I think that's all. I don't know if there are any questions